Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very, very special edition in which I, your host, Behram Qazi, will be talking to journalist and broadcaster Mark Machado, who is the host of the Murli Pod, and we're going to dissect Sri Lanka as a unit and how they'll fare versus Pakistan. So, first of all, welcome to Grassroots Cricket, Mark, and I hope you're well.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm just getting over another recent bout of COVID. So if you're out there, keep yourself safe. Every time for me it gets slightly worse, which is a bit bad. But at least I've got the Cricket World Cup to watch, so that's something, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there could be worse situations in which you could have COVID. This one might not be the worst. But anyway, speaking of your illness, the first question I have is somewhat related. Sri Lanka's team, it was a young, exciting team, but they've been absolutely plagued with injuries and not just like minor ones. You've got Wanindu Hasaranga, who has a grade 3 hamstring tear. He's out of the World Cup. Dushmanta Chamira is also, not available for selection. He's not part of the squad. And Mahesh Theekshana, who was so good for Sri Lanka with the new ball and in other phases as well. He was one of their wild cards, someone who was actually making lots of impact. He also finds himself injured on the bench right now, but is part of the squad. So, how much impact do you think that all these injuries have had on Sri Lanka's chances and performance?
Oh well, do you know what, Behram? If you'd asked me before our first game, I would have thought again. We played South Africa on Saturday. We conceded a lot of runs. I wasn't expecting that. I thought Asian conditions, the Delhi pitch should be kind of similar to the pitches that we're used to. That wasn't the case, and then with our young bowling lineup, and there's some players that are going to be absolute monsters in a few years' time, but they're still finding their feet in international cricket. They got absolutely hit around the park, and there's some moments when you're like, please make it stop, make it stop. But it was a learning curve. Missing those three players, was absolutely massive for Sri Lanka. Hopefully, Theekshana should be back on when we face Pakistan later this week. The other two, they're kind of there's potential that if they get fit, then other players might end up having to drop out and being those two could get something for injury. The kind of big hope is Hasaranga. I think Chamira's missed the last two ICC tournaments. So, he's just a very unfortunate player. Hasaranga was in the form of his life in the LPL. And then kind of almost scoring the winning runs for his team to get them through to the final. He pulls a hamstring. We haven't seen him since. Everyone's kind of like the big question everyone's asking themselves, if you're a Sri Lanka fan, is how long does it take to get over a hamstring injury, right? So hoping, touch wood, we might see him later on in the tournament. Though I don't know if this is the case with Pakistan. I don't follow them closely enough. Part of the problems around the team selection is that SLC don't really communicate very clearly with its fans and with the press. So there's lots of hearsay, lots of rumours. People have to, find out information in different ways. And one of the things that has come out is that maybe Chamira might actually be fit if we got to the back end of the tournament. If we were, and I'm not just saying the semi-finals or the finals, but if you get to a stage where you might need 2 wins out of the last 3 games, if we're in that position, they might be able to bring it back. Who knows? It's a problem with communication. I also think there's a slight problem as well with, I know this is something you and other people you host podcasts with have talked about, it's the squad sizes, where because they are so small, it's really hard to blood in the younger players. You can look at someone like Patarana, probably missed out on previous tournaments because they weren't allowed, and Walalage because they weren't allowed to bring in have a larger squad. So now when they are coming to the tournament, and admittedly those are 2 players who are very young, so I don't know if they would have played, they'd gone to the World Cup last year anyway, that they have no experience for these major tournaments. And, more experienced players end up, if they do get injured, they're backfilled by inexperienced youngsters.
Yeah, no, 15-man squads absolutely do not make sense to me for these mega events. I mean, if you look at, football and you have these 20 plus squads, right? And you've got like backups, 2 backups for each position or something of the sort. So yeah, the 15-man squads in cricket events or ICC events definitely do not make sense to me. And yeah, very right of you to point out Hasaranga's LPL, right? I mean, top scorer, leading wicket taker, captain, winning captain. he had everything going for him. And you'd have to say the timing of the tournament might have not been ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a big debate raging in Sri Lanka about this, and among Sri Lankan fans about the timing of the tournament, and also, I mentioned this is, I think this is our third tournament in a row. This and the last two T20 World Cups, where our bowling has been an absolute disaster, or because of player injuries. I say disaster. Our choices, our selection has been a problem. The last two T20 World Cups, it got to a position where, right, who's fit? You can be in the 11. Can we get 4 overs out of you? You can play. For incidences where players have broken down on the pitch, Banira Fernando, I think he's been to the last two T20 World Cups and he's not made it through. He's broken down in games in both those situations. I do, on Murley end, we've been talking about maybe they need like a director of fitness or somebody kind of to have a kind of more wider macro look. I know this is obviously a problem that all teams experience, right? Nazim Shah is out for Pakistan. There's so many players, fast bowlers have missed so much time for England. Bumrah only appears seemingly when there's a tournament. Bowlers and fitness is a problem. Whether or not the SLC should take some responsibility about when they plan the LPL. I mean, I do have some sympathy for the idea that professional cricketers exist to play cricket, right? They can't just be in Cotton Wool the whole time. When you look at Hasaranga in particular, his injury record up to this point wasn't that bad. If you were gonna make me pick a player I thought was likely to get injured in the Sri Lanka kind of 11, he wouldn't have been top of my list. I don't think. Whether or not they're pushing players too much, I don't know. I mean, I know this is highly cynical. My only hope for Sri Lanka to get out of this kind of more macro injury crisis, where we talk about it happening over a number of years, is actually that the bigger cricketing franchises start to have more control over their players, right? If you look at Tikshana and Patarana, they've been in the CSK setup since they were teenagers, and basically since them coming out of school. And they, from what I understand, is most of their medical stuff is kind of primarily looked after by CSK as well as LSC as well, right? But I've just got to wonder if CSK actually at this stage have better resources to look after our players than SLC do. I'm not saying that SLC have any bad intent or have aren't doing their best to their abilities. I think they absolutely are. But I think when you've got like CSK, just have a much, that they have a lot of money, and their only kind of scope is how do we get the best out of our players.
Yeah,
Right.
no, and here's to hoping that someone has an answer to that, right? Because that's where cricket is headed, and franchise T20 cricket is kind of disrupting our sport by every second, every passing second. That is the reality. But let's move on to some positives. We've talked about the injuries enough, and Sri Lanka. Okay, sure they conceded 428. There wasn't much to write home about with their bowling, but with the bat, there were some positives. Kusal Mendes played a quick fire 70 odd, and he was really, really good. And he's been in a lot of form, right? He has really come of age in that number 3 role and keeps wicket as well. And then you had 50s from Asalanka, who's been mighty impressive in the middle order, and captain Dasun Shanaka. So, how do you take those positives forward?
Should we talk about 3 of them individually? So, Kusal Mendes, I was really stoked for him. He's been in the runs for over a year now, since the kind of the T20 Asia Cup last year, and he's kind of continued that form in various franchise leagues. Did well in the SA T20. Wasn't playing at the IPL, but I think he's kind of knocking at the door of the IPL at the moment. Obviously, he's in one of those positions that's really difficult to find a contract in, because every domestic player in India seems to be a top order batsman who can score at 2 runs a ball. So I was really happy for him to continue his form into that and play with that intent. Charath Asalanka, that's just a classic Asalanka knock. That it's sometimes not pretty. Sometimes it's he'll play the most gorgeous shot you've ever seen, but he just sticks about and scores runs. I love it. Dasun Shanaka barely scored a run this year. You talk about not pretty knocks. That was a really, really ugly knock. He did nothing for like the first 30 balls, and then suddenly starts to hit it away. I think it probably is the exact innings that he needed. In a way, at the point when he comes into bat, in that it's very difficult to see how Sri Lanka could get over the line, especially because there's almost nothing underneath him. There's Malala again. Once you get him out, then we're into the kind of tail enders kind of thing, right?
Mm.
So I think he took the time and he realised the situation and he got the runs that he needed. There's been lots of questions over his captaincy. There was lots of conspiracy theories in the days and weeks leading into the tournament that he would like to have the captaincy taken away from him. So actually to get runs on the board the first game was very important, though, you know, overall the main difference in our batting and the way South Africa batted is that their top three run scorers all got centuries and our top three run scorers all got out in the 70s, which shows the kind of gap, I think, that's there. On top of that, you know, there was too many Sri Lankan players who probably gave their wicket away and just didn't do enough. But I think the one thing we can take from it is we did score over 300, which I wasn't sure we had that. How many times we've got that in us? But we seemed to do it, and everyone kind of showed intent, right? So even the players who did get out, they got out trying to play shots, I think, as far as I can remember. So I think, you know, the batting's not all a negative. There's been lots talked about how that kind of Delhi pitch we haven't seen too much of in Sri Lanka in recent years. And I think that's probably true. And I think there needs to be a bit of a rethink about it. But I'm excited to see what happens in the next game.
Yeah, no, absolutely, as am I. And definitely the biggest takeaway, I would say, is the intent with which Sri Lanka's batters, you know, went about their business. And chasing 400 plus is like a gargantuan task. And they did all right. They weren't ever going to win that game, but I think they made a fist out of it, or just at least gave something to cheer for the fans. You know, that's the least they possibly achieved over there. But anyway, let's move on to the Pakistan game, of course. Now, here's an interesting stat. Bangladesh have never defeated Sri Lanka in a World Cup. Sri Lanka has never defeated Pakistan in a World Cup, and Pakistan has never defeated India in a World Cup. Afghanistan hasn't defeated any of those teams. So I found that really, really interesting. And of course, Sri Lanka's been a quality side, you know. And if you look at the 2007 and 2011 World Cups, they were right up there with the very best. And, you know, that generation of, or golden generation of players with Sangakkara, Jayawardene, and Muralidharan, and there's so many more, right? There has been a dip in quality. Yes, they're not quite the same team anymore, but Sri Lanka very recently defeated Pakistan in the Asia Cup, and they didn't have all of these players available to them as well back then either. Tikshana was there, but let's see if he'll be available in this game in the World Cup or not. But I just want to ask you, who do you think will hold the key for Sri Lanka in this game versus Pakistan? And can they break the hoodoo? Will it be Walalage? Will it be Kusal Mendes? Will it be Kusal Pereira? Do you think he can maybe, you know, provide an aggressive start up top?
So I think Sri Lanka, this iteration of the Sri Lanka team is a confidence side, right? I think when things go well, they start to really go well for them, right? And they all jump on the bandwagon and they all get with it. And I think when things start to go wrong, they start to just absolutely slip away. We saw that with the way SA batted, right? When it didn't start to go well up top, it just got away further and further away from Sri Lanka, and their inexperienced bowlers didn't really know what to do. That's why I'm going to say, from what I understand, Tikshana should be fit and ready to go. So I think he's the key man, right? So he's the player that's coming in. I assume for Rajatha, though it could be for Patarana, who knows what the Sri Lankan selectors are thinking. And I think he's going to be the person. He's now the senior. He'll be the senior bowler in the side, who's kind of going to set the tone. He's very young for that job, but he's going to be the one that they're going to look for early on to try and get wickets, to try and make things happen. And if he's able to do that, then I think he can kind of get the ball rolling, and it could just be some really tight overs going for, you know, less than 4 runs and over right at the top could be enough to get it over the line. I mean, I'm a massive Walalage fan, Bear. I'm absolutely huge. I've been talking him up since I saw him play for the under-19s. But I got the sense on Saturday. I was like, okay, maybe it's all like these are the moments when he doesn't necessarily need to be the frontline spinner, which he ended up being. he eventually he'll develop. He should develop, I think, into being an all rounder. And I'm not sure when we talk, in 10 years' time, I don't know if we'll be talking about his bowling as much as we talk about his batting.
Hmm.
Um, so I think his rise in the last few weeks has been spectacular. But I wonder if that's because batters haven't seen enough of him. And actually, this will be what his second or third time playing against Pakistan. So I can't like I'd love him to have the same kind of impact that he had before. I'm not sure he will. He will though.
Yeah, well, let's see. And I mean, I really like Dunit Willalage. Yeah, that's a tongue twister because I think everyone was calling him Willalage and then lots of other pronunciations. But I've got it right now, Willalage. And yeah, I'm happy with that. Happy with myself. But anyway, moving forward, of course, Pakistan defeated the Netherlands in their tournament opener and they wobbled a bit. They lost 3 early wickets. They were 38 for 3. Then Rizwan and Saud Shakil, they came in and had a very, very important partnership for Pakistan. Rizwan got 60 odd and Saud got a 32 ball 50. And this is someone who had impressed in the test arena. So his approach and the way he went about his business, especially, with that no ball that he caught with the fielders outside the ring, and he caught onto that, then scored a six off the free hit. Great presence of mind. There was so much to like about Saud Shakil. So, what do you make of him as a cricketer thus far? Because you've probably seen a bit, right? You were watching the Test matches, Sri Lanka when Sri Lanka played Pakistan.
Yeah, absolutely, and he was a menace there to Sri Lanka as well. Yeah, he's a great player off the ball, right? He seems to read the game really well. I think in general with the Pakistan side, firstly they all come across as very likable, but I like to think they're kind of where Sri Lanka should be in about 3 or 4 years' time. It's like a group of players, kind of. It feels like they're around the same age. They've been together a little while. Feels like there's a lot of stability in the team. It also feels like, and I think someone like Sad Shakil and Rizwan as well are players who benefit from this, where even if you don't score for a couple of innings, you're not going to get dropped. It builds your confidence. I am absolutely running wild with Ifti Mania as well, right? And he's another player who you see, like, they've just built confidence over the years. I think sometimes, Behram, we forget that cricketers don't come into their prime till their very late 20s and into their 30s, right? And a lot of Asian players, and I think this is a problem in across all four countries in Asia, all five countries, if we want to include Afghanistan, where we expect them to come into the team and just hit the ball from the get-go, but actually they need to stay in a little while and they need to build. And that's why when I look at this Pakistan team, I think of it of like, this is where Sri Lanka could head. This is where, there's players in the Pakistan team who I think could be, who Sri Lankan players should be looking at and be like, that's where my career could go to. That's where I could end up. That's the player I could end up playing like. And Sad Shakil is definitely one of those kind of multi-format players. Because actually now, having players who can play in white ball and red ball is actually really something quite special, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, no, definitely. And he surprised all of us because I, for one, never thought that he could do a job at number 5. But the way he accelerated and improvised, and, he was looking to score runs, he was being innovative. And I think that was really, really promising. And yeah, of course, there were other performers. Nawaz and Shadab pitched in with runs. And then Haris Rauf was brilliant with the ball in the middle overs. Hassan Ali had a good comeback, got to, impressed with the new ball. He bowled some wobble seam up at the start and then
Yeah.
also some reverse swing, a bit of reverse swing later. So lots of positives for Pakistan. I just want to ask you that overall, and this is going to be the final question as well, what would you be wary of from Pakistan as an opposition? And what do Sri Lanka need to do in order to win this game?
Oh, that's the thing that really worries me about Pakistan is the batting, right?
Hmm.
Because I think as we touched with Sad Shakil over there, is that actually through your batting you can really start to pick the pace up at any point.
Hmm.
And normally, I don't know how you watch it, but when I watched it with my friends and family, every next batter is the danger man, and it's always like, oh, right, we've got that wicket, but oh gosh, now look who's coming in, kind of thing, right? He's the danger man. He's the danger man. But with Pakistan, they actually always are the danger man, right? So you get that first wicket, and it's like Baba comes in, and you're like, oh, maybe it would be better not to get that wicket. Just let these two have batted out of 50. But as it goes down, also I think that that versatility in the batting as well, being able to you get to a point where a lot of teams, I think England might have this problem going through the tournament where you get past about 3 or 4, and you're like, okay, they're good batters, but they're not going to pick the rate up, or they're not going to be able to. They're not going to want to accelerate to the last kind of 6 or 7 overs. Where I don't get their impression with Pakistan. They kind of, in a way, they play without fear. They're inhibited. Going back to how Sri Lanka win this game, I think it's a direct relation to that. I think when Sri Lanka play Pakistan and when they play India, they always play without fear because for them, psychologically, it's no shame to lose to Pakistan or India. I think there's still some countries, and much bigger countries than you realise. I think there is a shame associated for Sri Lanka to lose to them, and they start to play within themselves, and that's when they get into all sorts of trouble. With Pakistan, I think they put the reason why Sri Lanka have had success against them in Asia Cups recently is basically because they've played in inhibited cricket and they've just gone, we're the underdogs. It doesn't matter if we win or lose. Let's go out and smash this about.
Yeah, let's see if they do that this time, and it'll be a very, very interesting game in Hyderabad. All eyes will be locked on that game. But anyway, thank you so much for your time, Mark. I know you're sick, but it was very, very generous of you to take out the time and appear on our show, and it was an absolute privilege to host you.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
Yep, and best of luck for the game, and thank you to all viewers for tuning in for similar content. Stay tuned, brought to you by Grassroots Cricket.